Hi there, I'm Kimberley Peden, and welcome to day 2 of the summit. Before I get started with my presentation, I'd like to give a big shout out to Tracy McBeath for organizing this amazing weekend and for also inviting me to present. So when Tracy asked me, I was like, what do I want to talk about? What's relevant for me? What would I like to know more information about? Currently, I'm going through perimenopause, and I have to admit, as a physiologist, I really knew nothing about my own cycle. I just accepted that my menstrual period was the way it was, that all these symptoms that I had were mostly genetic, like migraines, and that I really couldn't do much about it. So I decided what better time than to deep dive into this topic and see if there was some information that I could use to help myself and then hopefully help other women that come into my practice down the track. So there we go. That's what I'm going to talk about, from menstruation through menopause and the in between. My mantra at the moment is this too shall pass, especially with hot flushes. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So a little bit about who I am, where I come from, how I became an exercise physiologist, how I became a low carb EP, and most importantly, what is an exercise physiologist? A little bit about my low carb journey, a little bit of sciencey stuff about hormones, the rise and fall of hormones, and in my journey through the changes and how I've kind of navigated through diet, nutrition, exercise, and even supplements along the way. And then most importantly, some strategies, how to take care of your hormones, what you can do in your life to really support yourself while you're kind of transitioning through these phases of life. So that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. So let's get into it. So who am I? So you may have noticed I have a little bit of an accent. I am Canadian and I have been in Australia for about 22 years now, and I absolutely love it. It's very similar. Vancouver, where I'm from, is very similar to Melbourne, where I live. And so it was always a dream of mine to come here. Now, before I came to Australia, I was a domestic violence counselor in Canada and ran a lot of support groups and programs in schools and prevention programs. So I've always kind of really loved doing group work. Um, in my younger years, I was very, very into sports. So I was an avid volleyball player, basketball, soccer, tennis, anything I could play. I loved team sports. I loved kind of moving and bopping around. But somehow in my mid 20s, I guess might happen to a lot of us when we go to uni and life changes, sports was the first thing that I let go of. And so I kind of had a period of, I guess, 10 to 15 years where I really wasn't doing any group sports, stacked on more weight, and really wasn't taking care of myself. At 30, I decided that I needed to make a change, and I packed everything up and moved to Australia. I landed in Adelaide, where I lived for about 3 years, and kind of started taking care of myself and nurturing myself there. I did some more study in massage and shiatsu and Reiki and some other healing modalities, which were really, really great for me at the time. Then moved to Melbourne and kind of started living my life in Melbourne, lived in various places around here. And then I was practicing shiatsu, and then I had a back injury. And then I was like, ooh, big life changes at that moment. And through that journey of injuring my back, I found Pilates. And this was the beginning of my reconnection back to exercise and movement. So it was kind of a natural progression from where I was as a kid to coming full circle into being an exercise physiologist. So in my late 30s, I kind of late 30s, early 40s. It's kind of hard to remember exactly when I took up running. My mother-in-law at the time was very, very unwell, and she has since passed. And I decided to take back up running and join a cancer fun run in her name. So, getting a little bit choked up. So yeah, so that was she was a great inspiration for me going back to running, and I have never stopped since. So I've done a lot of fun runs. And in my running journey, I started to take up cycling again. And then from cycling, I thought, oh, why not do something called a triathlon? So in Canada, we're kind of, in Australia, you guys, I think, get thrown in the water when you're born. But in Canada, we're either given skates or skis. So I actually didn't learn to swim until I gifted myself swim lessons in my mid-40s. So those became my three passions through my kind of late 30s and early 40s, reconnecting back into this exercise thing. And during that time, I was still teaching movement. So I was teaching Pilates and yoga, and I studied Tai Chi and this amazing dance form called Wu Dao. So I was running my own business at that time. And then one day, one of my clients walked in and she told me that her husband had gone to see an exercise physiologist. And I was like, an exercise what? So I did the Google and I kind of went, wow, that kind of sounds exactly like me. Without the master's degree. So I kind of researched it for a little while, and I was in my mid 40s and I was like, go back to school, no, not go back to school. How do I do it while I'm running a business? And then I just plunged in. So I went back to uni in my mid 40s and I came out with I did my full undergrad in Melbourne, and then I did my master's degree in the city, and I finished just before my 47th, 48th birthday. So I've been an exercise physiologist for about just over 3 years now. I started with practicing from home, so I had a home-based business here. But then COVID hit and the regulations of having a home-based business changed. And, where one door closes, another one opens. And now I'm working in a wonderful clinic in Williamstown. My business is called Breathe, Move, Relax. And I work with a great bunch of practitioners at a clinic in Williamstown called the Health Sanctuary. So that's kind of me. Now, some of you may not have heard of what an exercise physiologist does. Like I had never heard of it before. It was kind of a growing profession when I first went back to school about 7 years ago. But in a nutshell, an exercise physiologist is an allied health practitioner with a university and or master's degree, like myself. And what we do is we use exercise and lifestyle modifications for the prevention and rehabilitation of health conditions or injuries. So I see conditions in my practice such as diabetes, heart disease, neurological conditions, polycystic ovarians. I deal with weight loss, osteoporosis, but I also see things like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, arthritis, pretty much mostly every condition, and even people with just the general population as well come through my practice. Now, the other inspiration going back to uni as well is that my mom has Parkinson's, my father has type 2 diabetes and heart disease, and I was obese most of my life. So going and becoming an exercise physiologist was really a natural progression for myself from where I was at to where I wanted to be, so I could help myself, my family, and really people in my community in reaching their optimal health. So what I kind of do as an exercise physiologist, so some of you have maybe been to, a physio or an osteo or another allied health practitioner. And how I work is I'm looking at a client's current health condition, but I'm also looking at the social support they have, how they're sleeping, what they're eating, their current and past exercise history, what medications they're on, what their stress levels are like, and also any health or goals that they'd like to set for themselves. And then the other side of that is looking at barriers that can crop up and get in the way of people reaching those goals. We've all had them. I've been through them. Sometimes we get time poor, we get sick, work gets busy. And what I have found in my practice is the first two things that seem to go are exercise and nutrition. Yeah, and an exercise physiologist like myself will also look at those goals that you have set for yourself, whether it's just being able to get up and down off the floor, maybe to get back into a sport that you played as a young person, maybe you're rehabbing from hip or knee surgery, or you're prehabbing before you have your surgery. So we have a really vast scope of what we deal with, but it really is, the way I practice, it's really about getting you to do things that you enjoy and is sustainable for the rest of your life. So if you're not a runner, I would never ask you to run. If you like to dance, dancing can be cardiovascular exercise as well. So it's really about, I call it like putting the pieces of the puzzle of you together and then coming up with a plan together to reach those goals that you want to do for yourself, whether it's a 6-month goal, a year goal, or a forever goal. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. A bit of a technical issue there. So you can see here, this was me up in the corner here, January 2018. So this was pretty much in the last year of my master's. And this is where I stumbled upon low carb. I just stumbled upon an article about low carb for Parkinson's disease, and my mom has Parkinson's. So I thought, oh, I'm going to check this out and see what this is all about and see if it's evidence-based, and read the study and read the research and see if there's anything in this that is valid and that I can help my mom with. So along the way, through reading about Parkinson's disease, I also saw that it was great for weight loss. So the skeptic in me that has tried every diet out there, Jenny Craig, all those things, Weight Watchers, I've done them all. They've never been sustainable for myself. Just thought, this is just another, 6 weeks to a better bikini bod, which makes me cringe. But then I started to look into the research and realized that low carb has been around for many, many decades, and it's just been underground. But there's some great evidence, and it's scientifically based. And it was just, I was like, why not? Let's give it a shot. So you can see there's about a 6-month, 7th-month difference where I went from 115 kilos to about 95 kilos. So I pretty much dove into keto. I started keto, full stop, because I read that it was great for migraine headaches, which is something that I've had for a long time, ever since I first started menstruating. I thought, wow, let's just see what happens. Now, diving into keto after being a very, very carb-centric kind of diet was probably not the best way for me to go into it. I got the keto flu. I felt miserable for a while. My exercise intensity was very affected, so my training was very affected for probably about 3 or 4 weeks. I was a little bit miserable up and down, but then I turned the corner. So after I turned the corner, everything changed in my life. My migraines got less. Now I was having probably 2 or 3 migraines a month. They were reduced to maybe 1 every 3 months. I was losing weight. I was sleeping better. Now I've pretty much been a terrible sleeper for most of my life. But my sleep, I was sleeping through the night. I was sleeping 7 hours straight. Was absolutely magical for me. I had more energy. I could do a full day's work, go for a run, strength train, and all of that in the fasted state. And I was just absolutely just baffled by how the body could do this. So I just deep dove into everything low carb, keto, and have pretty much been doing a lot of N=1 experiments on myself for the last 2 or 3 years, because everybody's different. My body's different to your body, and finding my way to make it sustainable with the exercise that I do and the goals that I've set for myself. It really is an individual journey. So I kind of was experimenting for a couple years, up and down, and I was kind of doing it solo. And then I started connecting into some amazing Facebook groups, came across Tracy and all the wonderful people in the Low Carb Melbourne site, did some conferencing, and was just soaking up, reading books, watching podcasts, just listening to what everybody had to say about low carb and how amazing it is, not just for weight loss, but for other health conditions like Parkinson's and dementia and Alzheimer's. And as an exercise physiologist, I see these conditions in my practice, and I just wanted to be able to share with people the science around this, and then leave it up to them if they wanted to start incorporating it into their life. So then I kind of was like, studying nutrition would be fantastic, get another piece of paper. And I started looking into, becoming a nutritionist, and I got accepted into a few master's programs at some of the big universities around Melbourne. And then I started to do a bit of a questioning the lecturers and looking into the content, and I was very, very disappointed that it was still very much focused on pyramid eating and kind of a carb-centric focus. So I decided that wasn't for me at the time, and I'm hoping that that will change down the track. But then I stumbled upon the Nutrition Network. So I did my homework with them and have since done 3 certificates with them, and will continue to do courses with them because they are just fabulous. And I'll still, I'm still learning and learning more all the time, and just want to keep learning more and more, especially about low carb nutrition for health conditions that I deal with in my practice. So that's pretty much me. That's my little bit of a journey. This is me today. I'm about just around 85-ish kilos. Weight fluctuates up and down, but I am the healthiest. I am the fittest. I am the most kind of in control of my eating and exercise and nutrition that I have ever been. I've had some non-scale victory moments as well. I started out in this picture up here. I think it was about a size 22. Now I have I fit into a size 14 pants, which I don't think I've ever fit in, because I've been kind of obese and overweight most of my life. I don't know. I have the most energy I've ever had. I'm sleeping better. And yeah, so I'm still on this journey, and I'm not sure where I'm going to end up, but it really is exciting. So now, this slide is called Hormones, What the Fluctuating. So this is actually I'm going to dive into a little bit of the science in a sec, but you can see up here the premenopause and the postmenopause symptoms happen. Estrogen and progesterone start to drop. Again, for every woman, it's different. They kind of say between 48 and 51 as it starts, but perimenopause can be, 10 years prior to that. And over here, these are my actual blood results from 2013 to today. The most recent one was about a month ago. And what I can see is, judging from the traditional you are in menopause hormones, that I have been experiencing menopause or perimenopause for quite some time now. But I think I was just quite kind of just ignored it, kind of just pushed it off to the side and just kind of managed it as best I could. So in my weight loss journey, because I've always been focused on how to lose weight, over the last 2 years, my weight loss started to stall. It was going up and down. I started to grow my belly again, and my periods started to get heavier, longer, and my migraines returned with a vengeance. I was constantly stuffed up. I was itchy, but I just thought I had some food allergies and intolerances, so I started to adjust my diet again, which really worked for a time. But now I can see from those blood tests in the slide here that I was actually in perimenopause. It was a bit of an aha moment when I started to put these blood tests together for this presentation. But I was also a little bit angry with my doctors that no one kind of alerted me to this. But sometimes I think because I was so focused on my weight loss, that's what they were focused on. So, a bit of a forgiving person, but it would have been nice to know that some of these symptoms that I was having was actually me going through perimenopause. So in about 6 months ago, or 6 months to a year ago, I started to get hot flushes. I started to get night sweats. I have these constant body aches that I still am experiencing at the moment. I was waking up every 2 hours. It was, for a bad sleeper, that after I had started to manage through with diet and exercise, to now be waking up literally every hour to 2 hours, and a whole bunch of other new symptoms that I'd never experienced before. It was kind of like, I felt like it was the dwarves of menopause. And it was just, my symptoms were up, my symptoms were down. And the unfortunate part was that the strategies that had been successful for my weight loss really felt like they were no longer working for me anymore. So a lot of the time, through my cycles, through my transition, through my symptoms of migraines and tender breasts and things like that, I'd really just managed it with exercise, because exercise is fantastic for getting rid of cortisol and stress hormones, but it wasn't working anymore. I felt like I was just invasion of the body snatchers is what it felt like for me. I felt like someone had completely overtaken my body, and it reminded me of what I felt like when I first started going through puberty. It was like that all over again, but jacked up by about 1,000. It felt like my anxiety returned. Again, I wasn't sleeping very well. I was starting to get really grumpy, and I'm not a very grumpy person. I was starting to get snappy at people driving on the street, and it was like, whoa, who is this person? I didn't recognize this person. And now I realize that it was just my hormones changing. So now that I've kind of made peace with that, I'm really, really focused on finding strategies to make my way through this perimenopausal state. So again, I bumbled along experimenting with things. I found one of the women that I work with is an amazing naturopath, and she gave me put me onto some of these tablets that I now take, and it immediately stopped most of my hot flushes, because I was having hot flushes probably about every half an hour on some days. It was just crazy and out of control. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about nutrition and exercise. But before I get into that, I'm just going to talk about some kind of cool sciencey stuff that I kind of learned along the way. This is not health advice. This is my journey. But I also recommend you finding your team. If you are going through perimenopause or experiencing some of the symptoms, find your team, find your tribe, find your people to support you through this. Educate your family, let them know what's going on, because it really is this up and down time where you'll look in the mirror and some days you just won't recognize yourself like I'm like, who is that grumpy person staring back at me? Okay. So as you can see, we have our regular cycle over here. It's, we cycle, it's kind of like a heartbeat. We kind of cycle once a month, depending on if you have a regular cycle. And then you can see through premenopause, or what's like our regular menstrual cycle, perimenopause, and then postmenopause. So you can see that this period in here, perimenopause, is just all over the place. Yeah. And again, a little bit about women's cycle. As I alluded to before, I'm a little bit embarrassed that I knew really nothing about this, about cycles. I knew the basics about, what estrogen and progesterone and testosterone do, but I really had no clue that our sex hormones could have such an impact on everything from how we sleep, how we feel, and our stress levels. So I'm just going to kind of dial it back and go back to basics, because this is the stuff that I kind of learned along the way during this presentation. So during regular menstruation, there's this team down here called the HPO axis, which governs our reproduction, our puberty, and our aging. This team includes the H, which is the hypothalamus, the P, the pituitary gland, and O for ovaries. And it starts with the hypothalamus releasing a hormone, which signals to the master gland called the pituitary gland to secrete some more hormones called FSH and LH, which then these hormones signal to the ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone. So you can kind of see that if there's any interference in any of these steps, there can be issues along the way through puberty, reproductions, and even the phases of menopause. So there's a lot of things a lot of phases, and a lot of things can, kind of go wonky during any of those phases. Now, this little group up here, this other team up here called the HPA axis, it also consists of the hypothalamus, the pituitary glands, and the A stands for your adrenal glands. And its job is to help us move through stressful situations. And it releases the hormone cortisol basically to deal with stress and inflammation in the body. But it also has roles in metabolism, insulin sensitivity, our immune system, and our blood flow. And I'll talk more about cortisol in a few slides, because it has a really big impact when we're going through perimenopause. Cortisol is a really important steroid hormone whose job it is to turn down the immune system response by reducing its activity. So, when we get stressed, our nervous system gets alerted first, And if that stress continues for a little while, then the HPA axis gets alerted when stress is elevated, and it comes into the rescue like Superwoman to try to just tone things down. So it's basically like trying to reduce your outside voice to your inside voice. And it comes in to save the day and to restore what we call homeostasis or balance back into the body. Now, why these two teams are important is that they work together so that when there is stress, the HPA slows down. So our reproductive system will slow down to allow the HPA to do its job. Yeah. So again, it's really important that these two systems stay balanced because they really interact. And it's like if the HPA stays jacked up too much, then it leads to other issues that I'll talk about a couple slides down the track. And when the HPA slows down, which kind of makes sense because we really don't want to be thinking about reproduction while we're kind of running away from a grizzly bear, it allows the HPA axis or the cortisol to kind of be downgraded. So, the stress response kind of calms down and the body returns to its natural homeostasis. So that's pretty much a little bit about hormones. That's pretty much what I learned. I was either asleep or I missed the day when they talked about this at uni, but I found it really interesting. So I'm feeling like after this summit, this is an avenue that I'm going to really into more with hormones. So I've kind of talked about the main players of the hormones. We've got our progesterone, there's our testosterone, and there's our estrogen. So who are these main players and what are they do? So backing up a little bit, what are hormones? So hormones are chemical messengers that are excreted by our endocrine glands, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenals. They travel through the bloodstream to other target organs and tissues to produce a change. So just kind of like what I explained through the HPO and the HPA axis. They're involved in many bodily functions, growth, development, reproduction, metabolism, sugar and energy levels, sleep, aging, appetite. So pretty much basically everything in our physiology. Our body is always trying to keep everything in balance, and there is not really much margin or even wiggle room. And things like our environment, our physiological changes like perimenopause, nutrition, think too much sugar, alcohol, which overworks your liver and can interfere with weight loss, our lack of sleep or interrupted sleep, stress, the increase of cortisol, any of these things can throw the balance off and lead to kind of like a cascade of events that causes disruption to not just our body, but our mind, our emotions, and also our spirit as well. So remembering that we have this HPA axis and we have these HPO axis that have a big impact on our cycles. There's this other team that are called the neurotransmitters that are kind of similar to hormones, but they're electrical messengers that travel through the nervous system from neuron to neuron, and which produces change. So they act really quickly, and I'll talk a bit more about these because these are a really big and I think really important way to really support ourselves by accessing these neurotransmitters when we're in times of stress or times of challenge. So we can invite these players onto our team when we need them, and they're kind of have become my new lifesaver of perimenopause. So skipping back to our hormones, what they are and what they're happening as we transition from menstruation into perimenopause. So it kind of all starts with this lowering of progesterone, which I had no idea. I thought everything was related to estrogen. So it actually starts with the progesterone starts to lower, which means our estrogen is a lot higher. Then we have this kind of fluctuating roller coaster of estrogen. That graph that I showed you was kind of like up and down and all over the place, a bit like a roller coaster, that physiological flux. Yeah. Then we come into menopause where we have that lower estrogen, which is that kind of, they classify it as 12 months of no periods from your last period, yeah? And they talk about everything just kind of stabilizing in menopause. Can't wait till I get there. And the other thing that can happen during this time is we have more of a decreased insulin sensitivity. So again, we can tie it into weight loss, we can tie it into other health conditions that stem from high insulin. But back to perimenopause. So they say it starts somewhere from 2 to 12 years prior to menopause. They say that it's a temporary stage, and no one really knows how long each person's perimenopause is going to last. But again, I will say, and I hope that it is true, that everything starts to stabilize once we get into menopause. So you can see from this photo here that these are pretty much a lot of the symptoms that women will experience as they go through perimenopause. I can pretty much tick most of these that when looking back from today and what I'm experiencing today and over probably the last 2 or 3 years, definitely experienced a lot of these. The joint soreness, longer cycles, heavier periods, things like that. So these are just some of the things that as the hormones are going up and down, the progesterone's coming down, the estrogen's going up, they can lead to some of these symptoms that we have. So just a little bit more about the sex hormones. So progesterone, which I now believe is the most important hormone of reproduction, is a calming hormone, helps to reduce inflammation. So it's kind of like our chilled hormone, helps to promote sleep and helps to calm the nervous system. So you can kind of see that when progesterone starts to tank, it really has an impact on everything. Inflammation in the body, our sleep patterns, and how it can really kick that HPA axis into gear, because it's we're no longer having that progesterone in our system, so everything else is just kind of working up in overdrive. So it really helps to stabilize the HPA axis. But again, with it decreasing in perimenopause, the body has to kind of figure out how to do things differently. So it decreases, it can no longer counteract the stress as well. And now estrogen is kind of creeping up and getting louder in the background. So this differentiation between one thing dropping and one thing creeping up and going up and down really can create a lot of these symptoms that we have. So when we start to lose progesterone, some of the symptoms that you might experience are muscle weakness, heart palpitations. So I hear that a lot from clients I see in my practice. Anxiety, I definitely have gotten that one. Increased headaches, tic. Nervous system disturbances, tic. Irritability, definitely, especially on the roads. Increased in anxiety, tic. Insomnia, tic. And the one that I found really interesting was histamine intolerance. I've been having a stuffed up nose for a couple of years now, and I think I said earlier that I thought it was just allergies, but it turns out that histamine intolerance, itchy skin, is a massive symptom of perimenopause. It was like the light bells have started to go on for me. The other things that decreasing progesterone can cause are incontinence, glucose intolerance, insulin resistance, and our suppressed immune system. So it really has a massive impact on all our physiology. Now let's go to the big one, estrogen. So we know, estrogen is something that everybody talks about. It's very vital to bone and heart health. They call it the happy hormone. So it's very linked to the other neurotransmitter called serotonin, which I'll talk about in a few moments. Helps to boost serotonin and enhance sensitivity to insulin. So you can see when estrogen's all over the place, serotonin's our happy hormone, that you can see why we start to maybe experience, some of us will get mood swings, up and down, like that roller coaster up and down. So estrogen can start decreasing in our 40s, and we can lose up to 75% of it in perimenopause. So again, it's like that roller coaster up and down every day. It's like waking up and something is different. As estrogen decreases, FHS and the LH hormones increase. And where did I find this? But they say that they can be released every 60 to 90 minutes, which is a possible reason why we get those hot flushes that come and they come and go and they come and go. And I know I was really experiencing that myself, where there was a period where I felt like I was having them every 30 minutes. It would just break into the sweat. So again, it's that estrogen changes causes other changes. And when one thing changes, it has a cascade events to everything else connected to it. Again, linked to estrogen are joint pain, the increase of osteoporosis with the increase in bone loss, decreased muscle mass. You might feel extra tired. Tic, that's one of mine. I just feel like I've never been fully rested. The headaches change, the mood swings, skin changes, the itchy skin, heavy periods, breast pain, night sweats, all of those things. So as I explained before, the seven nasty dwarfs of menopause or perimenopause, but I feel like I've got at least a dozen or so more, and it changes from day to day. So learning how to manage these symptoms is really a focus of where I'm heading for myself, and also in finding ways to help other people. And then we've got testosterone. So the testosterone is our hormone that's linked to motivation, libido, stamina, enthusiasm, and drive. They say it decreases about 15% during our cycle changes. And when it starts to decrease, we can feel things like sad, irritation, a bit bored. Yeah, I tend to break into tears at the drop of a Kleenex commercial. So I know my testosterone is definitely changing over time. It also contributes to obviously having a low libido or issues with reaching climax during sexual activity, depressed mood, decreased stamina. It's kind of that. I feel like some days I've just lost my get up and go, my motivation to do things. So these are kind of the main sex hormones that you can see that can cause disturbances during our cycle changes or transitioning through perimenopause. Now, as hormonal responses take a longer time to both start and finish, there are a few lifestyle behaviors, diet and exercise, and in addition to hacking what we call the happiness hormones, because they act much quicker. I kind of alluded to them earlier, our neurotransmitters, and I kind of call them the third team that we can kind of call on to help us manage these symptoms. So I'm going to have a little bit of chat about those now. So I call it Get Your Daily Dose. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins as a way to manage your stress, not just your stress, but kind of your symptoms through perimenopause as well. We can hack into these at any time. So firstly, we're going to start with the dopamine. So they call this the reward chemical. See the tick? So dopamine, this kind of comes into play. Motivation, it helps with learning, pleasure. When you've ever kind of done a to-do list and you've ticked, you get that feeling of accomplishment connected to our desires and our needs. So how can we recognize when dopamine is deficient? We feel procrastination, a bit of low self-esteem, no motivation, kind of feeling like the symptoms of perimenopause, inability to focus. You might feel a bit anxious, and mood swings or even boredom. So the great news is we can have an impact on these neurotransmitters very quickly through activities and things that we do. So some of those things that we can do are meditate. We can create to-do lists. I mean, how good does it feel to do that big tick when you've completed a task? It just releases that dopamine. Self-care activities, celebrating wins. I always say celebrate your own wins as well as other people's wins. Exercise, of course. Get creative, painting, singing, tapping into the right side of the brain can release that dopamine. And there's foods that they say, this isn't my scope of practice, but this is just what I have found through my research. They say beets, edamame, meat, eggs, dairy, and we know sometimes chocolate, because we know we can get that dopamine and serotonin hit from dark chocolate. So there's certain foods that will give us that dopamine hit and hack into that neurotransmitter as well. Then the next one, the oxytocin. So most of us know this as the love hormone, or some people call it the hug or the cuddle hormone. It's a bit of a hybrid. It's a hormone that kind of acts like a neurotransmitter. The thing we have to be careful with is that cortisol is its biggest threat. So oxytocin is turned off through our stress hormone cortisol. So, if you've ever felt really quite stressed out, it's really hard to feel very huggy and loved up at the same time. Yeah. So they have this inverse relationship with each other. So in order to tap into those loved up feelings of oxytocin, we really have to find ways to manage our cortisol as well. So, and you can, when you can tell when you're not releasing your oxytocin or not tapping into it, because we can feel disconnected. You might feel like you've got burnout, a bit withdrawn from activities in your life. And apparently chronic sugar, like taking in sugar all the time, has an impact on oxytocin as well. So how do we tap into oxytocin? So physical touch, holding hands, socializing with friends, have a massage or acupuncture. Animals are a great way. Petting an animal, a cat, a dog, whatever animal is your friend, listening to soothing music, again, exercise, and always come back to exercise. We can meditate, mindful and joyful eating. Laughter is a great way to tap into oxytocin. Hugging, they say that it takes about 9 hugs for a day for good well-being. So you can start by giving yourself a hug today. But also giving compliments, giving compliments to others, like really valid, like really heartfelt compliments can switch on oxytocin as well. So the next one is the serotonin. So most of us have probably heard about this one, the mood stabilizer, the one that connects us, that is released when we have things like chocolate, dark chocolate. It is the relaxing and the calming hormone. I kind of alluded to it when I was talking about estrogen because they're very interlinked. So when estrogen can tank, so can serotonin. So that's, again, those moods. So as estrogen's going up and down, so is our mood, so is our serotonin. So it's a good thing to be able to tap into the other feel-good hormones, like the dopamine and the oxytocin, especially when you're going through perimenopause and it's just not stabilizing, and estrogen is all over the place. You might feel other symptoms of low serotonin are, mood swings, social phobias, you're craving things like that are sweet and carby, and ways that we can tap into or access this hormone are through exercise, things like running, walking in nature, swimming. So really kind of rhythmic exercise is a great way to tap into it. They say cold showers, not a fan of that. So that's one I'll never have the evidence on, but some people say that works for them. Sunlight, which can be a bit challenging during winter time, so other things, and foods containing tryptophan, so things like turkey, dairy, dates, sunflower seeds, omega-3 fatty acids, things like fish and flaxseed, probiotic foods. They say sauerkraut. And it makes sense because I know when I'm feeling a bit crappy, I tend to go for things that are a bit pickled. So I have sauerkraut, I have pickled ginger, I have olives and pickles in my fridge at all times, and it's very interesting. Like, our body is very switched on to go for the things that we need the most. It's just whether or not we make those connections. So for me, that was a bit of an aha moment. Now, the unfortunate part is that they say that things like coffee and spicy foods will switch off your serotonin, and I'm never going to give up my coffee, so I will just make an effort to maybe regulate my coffee. And then the last happy hormone are endorphins. Now, we've all heard about that. Exercise releases endorphins. Endorphins are kind of a natural analgesic or pain medication that help with anxiety and depression and mood swings. They help with aches and pains. So that's why exercise is fantastic when you're experiencing chronic pain. Ways we can tap into our endorphins: laughter, again, exercise, some essential oils, not my scope of practice. But essential oils, smells and senses can tap us into that. Comedy, laughing, crying can release endorphins. Dark chocolate, here we go again with the dark chocolate. So many benefits to dark chocolate. Exercise, stretching, massage, meditate. So those really kind of self-nurturing, self-soothing things can really take us into all of these 4 body chemicals. And like I said, because they're connected to the nervous system, the reaction of releasing them are so much quicker than trying to access our hormones. So when we're feeling what we're feeling or experiencing what we're experiencing, there's these really easy hacks to tap into these neurotransmitters to get your daily dose, to help manage your stress, manage your symptoms, and just self-nurture and manage yourself. So coming over to here, effects of high cortisol in menopause. So I think that cortisol is really, really important to take a look at. So managing your stress, not just through the HPA axis, but our central nervous system as well, called the sympathetic nervous system, which is what we call our fight or flight. You know, when something scares you, it turns on your nervous system, and then the nervous system calms down. If that stress continues for a long time, then we transition into our HPA axis, and that's when the cortisol comes into place. So kind of the effects of high cortisol in menopause. So when it's functioning well, cortisol is released to deal with the stressor, and then it's switched off. However, if it's chronically high and not functioning, then it can result in the following. So we can experience things like insomnia, morning fatigue, frequent colds, craving for carbs and sweets, digestive problems, aches and pain, mood swings. You see the list just goes on. It's just really kind of mimicking the symptoms that we get in perimenopause. Increased urination, excessive thirst. We can experience arthritic symptoms. Our immune system is decreased, our metabolism is decreased, and it can lead to something called adrenal fatigue, which we really don't want to get there. So it's really important to manage your stress, whether it's on a daily basis or so it doesn't get out of control. And I call it how to tame the beast. Yeah. So firstly, I talked about how cortisol and oxytocin, as cortisol goes up, oxytocin can drop. So even finding ways to tap into that oxytocin, like I just talked about, is a really great way to help manage the impact of cortisol, and if it's quite high cortisol. So other ways we can tap into that are slow, deep breathing. Yeah, so taking a big belly breath, because a lot of the times when we're stressed, we tend to breathe up here in our upper chest, which actually creates stress in our physiology. And when we breathe deep down into our belly and we access our diaphragm, it taps into something called the vagus nerve, which is one of the longest nerves in the body, and it really helps us to relax. It taps us into what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what they call the rest and digest. So it's really that chill out, calm down, slow down, take a break. Just that active being rather than doing all the time. Yeah. Movement can help us, movement and exercise can help dissipate cortisol in the body as well. Incorporate things that you love doing in your day, whether that's going for a walk or hanging out with friends, laughing, reading a book. Walking in nature is a great way to decrease the effects of cortisol. Nurture yourself. Yeah. So nurture yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. I always say, fill your own tank first. Yeah. So giving to yourself and filling your own tanks first allows you to give more to others if you choose to. Yeah. Check your attitude and your perspective as well. Like, are you holding on to things that you're ruminating about, or it's creating stress, or you're just constantly going over and over and over in your head? Because that in itself will create that increasing cortisol and stress in your mind and body as well. Most importantly, take time to pause, to breathe, to smile. Yeah, because when we connect to ourselves, when we connect to others, we can release that serotonin. We release those feel-good, happy body chemicals. Controlling our blood sugar. So watching what we eat helps with that HPA axis and that cortisol as well. So there's lots of different things. Everybody's not going to do the same thing, and not everything's going to work for everybody. Yeah, so it's about, like I said earlier, finding your own team, finding your own way, and learning from other people. Really find your team of people as you're going through this time. So coming into some of the things that I do and have worked for me. Yeah. So exercise or diet. So foods that I've mentioned before that can kick on the happy hormones. I take bone broth. I just find it It's helping with balancing my hormones. It's helping with old injuries, joint function, my skin, and my immune system as well. There's these things called adaptogens that I have not, you're going to have to Google on that one yourself. But there are things that we can take naturally, but that's not my scope. So I recommend visit a naturopath. Obviously, your nutrition. So whether you're low carb, you're keto, you're carnivore, your ketovore nutrition, can help you focus on your symptoms and your goals. But make sure it's individualized for you. I do a lot of intermittent fasting. Some days I do, the 16, what's the math? The 16-8, or some days I go one meal a day. Sometimes I have extra carbs on the weekend. Physiology, the body's really, it can plateau really quickly. So you always got to keep it guessing. Yeah. Do something, the body kind of adapts, and then you have to change it up. So you constantly have to keep it guessing to get the results that you want for your body. Supplements, again, these are the ones I take here that have helped me. Some magnesium, the one I mentioned for hot flushes, one that I take to sleep. But again, consult with a practitioner that's trained in these areas. Magnesium is one that is, I think, great for everybody. But again, speak to somebody, especially if you're on other medications, because things will have an interaction, and that's not my scope. MCT oil is great for focus, and also great for transitioning while you're transitioning into low carb, if that's something that you're about to journey into. So you can get MCT, what's called medium chain triglycerides, from fat and from butter, and coconut oil. But the one that's really beneficial to things like gut health, brain health, fat adaptation is called C8, caprylic acid. Another thing that you can do that worked for me was becoming fat adapted. So I got fat adapted through ketosis, and I still kind of cycle through being in and out of ketosis. But now that I am fat adapted, I feel like, I'm metabolically flexible enough that I can kind of have a few more carbs when my body's asking them for, or when I'm doing some exercise that I feel like golf is a very anaerobic sport that I'm playing now, so I feel like I need a little bit more of carbs before I play a sport. That's just my body, and again, every body is different. I take hydrolyzed collagen, like I said, because I find it's like bone broth, but I put it in my coffee in the morning, and I find that just it keeps me full longer, and I just feel like it's doing a great benefit to my joints and my body. So those are the things that have worked for me with diet. And then, of course, exercise. Who would I be as an exercise physiologist if I didn't mention exercise? Exercise is fantastic because it helps deplete excess cortisol. It reduces inflammation in the body. It will improve your insulin sensitivity. Obviously, it'll increase your muscle mass and bone density. It will help with decreasing blood pressure, heart rate. It helps with anxiety. For me, running and walking are my happy places that just clear my head, clear my mind space for me. It also helps to reduce hot flushes. What I have found that days where I've missed exercise, that my hot flushes come back screaming at me. Exercise will also help with fat burning, getting into fat adaptation, and transitioning from from a carb-based diet into a low carb one as well. Which exercise is the best? Well, first of all, whichever one you enjoy the most. Yeah. So whichever one you will sustain long term. So dancing, walking, lifting weights, whatever's your thing. Any movement is good movement as long as it doesn't cause pain. Yeah. I believe all women need strength training just because of our physiology, and we lose bone density and muscle mass pretty much after we turn about 35, and then menopause, we lose even more at a faster rate. So strength training is key in something that I do for myself as well. So what has worked for me? Changing my mindset. So kind of what I did in my 20s, go harder and go faster. I kind of say not now, not ever. It's about going at the pace of wherever you're at and finding what works for you in that time. Shorter duration, yeah. So when we're going through perimenopause, our hormones, everything, like I said, everything's all kind of crazy and jacked up, and the cortisol is a bit high. So putting in high intensity exercise can actually increase that. So we want to kind of back off a little bit and have maybe smaller durations, more throughout the day, lesser intensity. So it actually helps to quiet that stress response in our body, calm the cortisol. Yeah. So I do yoga, I meditate or do deep breathing, walk in nature, whatever kind of brings your breath from here down into the belly will help with calming those stress responses. Lifting weights, I've mentioned, I love watching women and training women to lift heavy weights. It's just amazing. I run strength training groups at my clinic, and it's just watching us all lift heavy stuff, barbells, is just fantastic. Of course, you have to do it progressively, but being able to, see women lift these, because then they can lift their grandchildren and, maintain all this muscle and bone health. It's just absolutely fantastic. Another thing as you're transitioning is rest days. You have to help support your adrenals that are working overtime. And what I've realized that every day is a rest day at the moment. So every day I'm taking time to get on the floor, get on my mat, and just breathe. Like I said, my anxiety is kind of through the roof. So if I don't do something where I calm down and just stop every day, then it just gets worse and worse and worse. It just gets louder and louder and louder. And then I can't tap into my oxytocin. And that's such a great body chemical that I want to be able to. So calm the cortisol beast. Yeah. I talk about active relaxation. So there's things in our life that we do, like a good Netflix binge, or we, scroll on our iPads or our phones or whatever, which is kind of relaxing in some sort. So it's helping us switch off from the day, switch off from, things. But active relaxation is actually really stopping. So turning off the screens, just connecting into your breath. Yeah. So tapping into that parasympathetic nervous system, so important to control the stress response and to really help us navigate through that perimenopause stage. So we really want to be able to control it, and we can. And they've done research on this that says, it can take 2 to 3 minutes to change from that stress nervous system or a sympathetic system into our rest and digest or a parasympathetic nervous system. That is active relaxation, where you're focusing on, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it breathing, you can call it meditation, but we're actually taking that time just to stop and breathe and be. And if you can do one thing every day to help you through those symptoms, take some time every day to breathe. Take that, put on a phone timer, 2 to 3 minutes, longer if you're having more of a kind of a bumpy day, and just breathe. Put your hands on your belly. You can do it with me now. Do it with me now, and just breathe in for a count of 4. Breathe out for a count of 4. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. And just feel your belly expand as you inhale. And feel your belly soften as you exhale. And just continue to do that until you feel your shoulders start to relax away from your ears. Until you feel that your mind becomes a little bit more present in this time, in this space. Taking time to breathe and just be every day will really help with your hormones, will help with those spikes of cortisol, those changes that you may be experiencing going through menopause. So just be and breathe for 2 to 3 minutes, because you're worth it. So in saying all of that, thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, you can find me on Facebook on Breathe, Move, Relax. You can find me on Instagram at the Low Carb EP. Feel free to drop me an email, share your experience. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time today. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation and hope to see you one day in Melbourne. Take care. Bye.